We're only human.
Often called one of the greatest science fiction films of all time, RoboCop is the real deal. Directed by Paul Verhoeven and written by Edward Neumeier and Michael Miner, the film followed Alex Murphy, a cop who dies in the line of duty and is converted into a cyborg by a corporate firm owning the Detroit Police, OCP. It is not just about a man empowered by cybernetics, but a man trying to define what it means to be human. That existential question was the core of RoboCop and what made audiences turn up for the sequel. The sequel, however, was super disappointing. It meandered a lot from the true essence of RoboCop and instead laid emphasis on meaningless fights. If you were someone really disappointed with the sequel, I have some good news. You might have noticed that the writing credit for RoboCop 2 has been split between Frank Miller and Walon Green. What if I told you there is a comic book series of Miller's original unedited script? That's right, today I'm going to tell you about the RoboCop the creator behind Daredevil, Born Again, and The Dark Knight Rises gave us. Let's go! Why was the sequel so bad? Let me refresh your memory on what RoboCop 2 was about. It started in the dystopic Detroit that we were familiar with. Things have been getting worse since Detroit is bankrupt due to their debt with the OCP. OCP wants to foreclose on all the public property in Detroit so they can begin work on Delta City, a radical urban development project. They underfund the cops to fuel crime in the city so that people support OCP's Detroit takeover. One of the people getting encouraged by all this is Kane, a dude with a messiah complex who thinks he can save all of humanity through Nuke, a very addictive drug. His lieutenant is Hobb, who looks barely 13 but is a street-savvy sadist. Most of the cops go on strike because of the lack of funding, and RoboCop is left working with no rest. His partner, Ann Lewis, shows up from time to time, but she isn't that much help. His resurfacing memories only make his work harder as he begins to drive past his widow Ellen's house regularly. Ellen sues OCP because of it, but OCP executives convince him that he can't give Ellen the love, companionship, and comfort of a real man. So, he tells her that he has no memory of her and asks her to forget him. Meanwhile, OCP has been working on RoboCop 2 under the supervision of Donald Johnson, the OCP president's right-hand man, and Dr. Juliet Fax, a psychologist. After using brain-dead cops, all RoboCop 2 models immediately kill themselves, and Fax offers to take over the project as she thinks she knows what kind of guy to look for. According to her, the only reason Alex Murphy was successful was because of his morals and strict Catholic upbringing. Instead of looking for someone like him, she takes a hard left and begins looking at criminals who have a desire for immortality and power. RoboCop's encounter with Kane leaves him dismembered, and Fax programs 300 new directives in his software to make him useless. RoboCop begins to talk to kids about conservation of resources, not smoking, and not using bad words. Lewis catches on to it when she sees him Mirandize a corpse. RoboCop realizes the new directives are messing him up, so he shocks himself with a high-voltage transformer and reboots himself. He then leads the striking cops to Kane's hideout. Kane is shot in the encounter, and Fax decides to use his brain for RoboCop 2. Her reasoning is that he'd be easier to control because of his nuke addiction. Kid criminal Hobb, in the absence of Kane, offers to get rid of Detroit's debt in exchange for the mayor turning a blind eye towards the nuke drug syndicate. The corrupt mayor agrees. OCP sends RoboCop 2 to stop the deal, and he kills everyone there except the mayor. At the unveiling of RoboCop 2, he goes berserk after seeing Nuke and starts attacking everybody in proximity. RoboCop battles RoboCop 2 and smashes his brain. The OCP president, who was having an affair with Fax, frames her for everything and gets away with it. That was the plot of RoboCop 2. There were so many plot points that it was a mess Marie Kondo would be delighted with. There was the drug plot, the OCP, corruption, there were also kids robbing people in between, RoboCop 2, Fax. At one point it became hard to keep up with everything. After all that, we did not even get a proper conclusion. So why did RoboCop 2 fumble the ball so badly? The answer is Hollywood bureaucracy once again. When it comes to stories being narrated, the medium the narration is being done adds a lot too. If it is a novel or a comic book, the people involved in the creative decisions are one or two. When it comes to Hollywood, nearly everyone has a say. Not only did Miller have to deal with the producer's demands, but he also had to take in directions from Peter Weller, who believed he knew the character better than anybody else. According to Weller, RoboCop made no value judgments, and he knew instinctively what Alex Murphy would do or say. No offense to Weller, but that's really not how any of this works. Every single person's vision regarding a character is different, and if the writer is not allowed to explore his vision well, it is no doubt going to be a tangled mess of compromises. It's a classic case of too many chefs spoiling the broth. Most importantly, they forgot the existential dread of RoboCop's existence. They made him abandon his human side completely by telling his widow that Murphy's dead and he doesn't address it again. Edward Neumeier, the creator of RoboCop, had paired up with co-writer Michael Miner once again for RoboCop 2, but they had to rush the project as they were also writing for another project. That draft was set 25 years after the first film, and the time gap was explained as RoboCop getting a makeover after being blown up by a bank robber. The main villain was a super entrepreneur called Ted Flicker, who wanted to turn the government into a corporation he could own, much like what the old man was trying to do in the film. The society was split between the upper-class people who lived in plexes made out of the previous metropolitans, and outplexers who lived outside these communities. That script also had a lot of elements like smudge, an addictive narcotic that increased violence, genocide against outplexers, and RoboCop being toyed with by a Chinese hacker. This, at least according to me, was more along the lines of the first film. That was about how money corrupts, and that hacker plot point might have dealt with Alex Murphy questioning whether he still retained the free will that makes one a human being. This script was rejected by Orion Pictures as they thought it was too gritty and they couldn't wait for another draft. A writer's strike in 1988 further complicated this, and Miner and Neumeier were fired for breaching their contract. Though he was fired, Orion believed in Neumeier's vision and took his recommendations for his replacement seriously. Neumeier's suggestions were Alan Moore, who you might remember as the writer of V for Vendetta and The Watchmen, and Frank Miller. Only Miller agreed to sign on as Moore wasn't interested in working for movies. Miller was inspired by the original draft by Neumeier and Miner and focused on corporatism in his script. Producer John Davison loved the script, but he could not say yes to it. He thought it was unfilmable. There are a ton of things that must align for a film to be considered filmable. Budget, logistics, actor constraints, committee decisions, and a common creative goal all need to be taken into consideration before greenlighting a script. Miller's script fell short of that, and Walon Green was brought in to rewrite it. The film we see is Green's edit of Miller's work. What Miller's original script means to fans. Miller is someone known for his dark and gritty work. Add in a sharp criticism of capitalism and the media, and you have an award-winning formula. That was what Miller's script was about. In the 2000s, Frank Miller decided to publish his script as a comic book series. When fans read that, a wave of resentment washed over, as they believed the comic book series to be the sequel they deserved. It matched the tone of the first film, a satire about the ugly soul of the corrupt corporate and the truth about privatization. It didn't include needless extra plots and characters and put the limelight on the decaying state of the world RoboCop was set in. So, let's take a look at the 9-issue series, which was illustrated by Juan Jose Rip and adapted by Stephen Grant. The whole world is in decay. The story starts with the pitiful state of Detroit, cabs on fire, people looting and plundering, and arsonists having as much fun as they can. Luke Spindle, a controversial TV show host who does mostly reactionary content flashes on screen to talk with the cops who have been on strike for a while. In the middle of the program, a sultry robot advertises the future of sex. Luke dismisses the concerns of the cops, stating cops don't strike, and makes lewd comments toward the female cop while his audience cheers on. Think the Jerry Springer Show, but with real-life issues. Another ad flashes on screen about Delta City with the promise of a utopic city where kids are safe and employment is guaranteed. The ad also shows a man telling people that they might have to give up their homes, as you can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs while stepping over a dead body. In reality, buildings were being destroyed before the occupants moved. In one such demolition, a young girl gets separated from her family. As she wanders around looking for a safe place, she is kidnapped by a couple. In this city, RoboCop is still on duty, driving around in a car with shattered glass and riddled with bullets. The radio lists off a bunch of crimes happening nearby, and RoboCop spots the girl screaming in a car. He gives chase and shoots the couple down. The man tells him about the kidnapping operation in a nearby factory, and RoboCop throws him down. He then picks up the child and heads to the factory to see what's happening. In the factory, we see a bunch of kids in cages. The men there were running a trafficking racket where they would kidnap children who were separated from their families due to the destruction and were selling them off to rich families in the name of adoption. The man in charge demands more white children as his clients prefer them, and his lackey complains that the white neighborhoods were only being torn down recently. Their conversation is interrupted by RoboCop's arrival. One of the sensible men working there is shocked to see RoboCop and suggests surrendering to his boss, but the boss doesn't want that since he knows he's going to be put in jail for the rest of his life. When RoboCop begins taking down all his henchmen, the boss points a gun at one of the children and asks RoboCop to kill himself if he wants the kid alive. The fool doesn't know that it's RoboCop he's dealing with. Before he can think, RoboCop aims at his wrist and the man drops his gun. A sellout and a strike. We get another cut of a TV show, and this time it's Lilac, a scantily clad host with biceps that would rival Hulk Hogan's. Her guest is pop psychologist Margaret Love, who used to be an outspoken critic of OCP for selling RoboCop toys, as she considered RoboCop to be too aggressive, violent, and hostile to be a good role model. She had even staged a public burning of the toys, but now she was working for OCP, who not only sold war toys, but also made war tanks. Lilac tries to ask her why she just took the money and ran, but like all good sellouts, she covers it up with a lot of big words and jargons that didn't really make any sense. She concludes the segment by saying that her private practice has shown that people were really confused and unhappy. So her intention for joining the OCP was to help every citizen get pro-social conscious and remind OCP about its commitment to the psychological welfare of kids. On the streets, a man approaches a sex worker, reminding her that she used to work in the Burger King he used to visit and that she never even spared him a glance. She angrily retorts that the Burger King she was working in had been torn down. The man attacks her out of resentment when suddenly RoboCop intervenes. Seeing the woman, he is reminded of his wife Ellen. RoboCop trudges over to the police station, which has turned into a mad place because of the strike. Cops are overworked, holding cells are overflowing. As soon as Lewis catches sight of her partner with blood flowing out of his mouth, she asks him if he's alright. Though Murphy says yes, he faints. Sergeant Warren Reed mentions between calls that he hasn't slept in the last 76 hours. They get an ambulance and transport him to OCP. While that is happening, a new branch of the OCP, Rehabilitation Concepts, arrives at the station to help maintain civic order while the strike is going on. Margaret Love gets excited as soon as she hears that RoboCop is in the building and rushes down to check him out. In the operating chamber, if that's what it's called, doctors and engineers take care of RoboCop and begin fixing him. Fleck, the man supervising RoboCop, blames RoboCop for wasting a lot of their money. Margaret asks him who he is, and when he replies that he is Alex Murphy, she records that he has an attachment to vestigial human memory. Though he is fixed soon, as soon as the others leave, Margaret traps him in a chair and asks him to call her mom. Yeah, this one has an unresolved Jocasta complex. She makes him run the recorded video of what happened in the brewery the previous nights and demands an explanation as to why he didn't kick out the people protesting there. She tells him that he disobeyed a direct order by not expelling them, as OCP had bought the brewery and the protesters were trespassing. She then records a bunch of exaggerated observations that even a first-year student out of Intro to Psychology would object against, and shocks him with electricity. She repeats the order for him to call her mom again. When he is left out of the chair, Margaret reports to the second-in-command at OCP that RoboCop has very few directives, and if she was given 2 days, she could mold a great living personality. The senior executive isn't on board with her plan, as RoboCop is popular and he needs all the public support he can get right now. She criticizes Fleck's attempts in recreating a RoboCop. All the RoboCops he had engineered after Murphy had killed themselves or reacted violently to the experiment. Fleck thinks that the sergeant gunned down after 15 years of experience would be a good choice, but Love disagrees, pointing out that the sergeant was too used to having things his own way and he would not be cooperative. According to her, Murphy was a bad choice for the job, as he had a corrupted sense of what was right and wrong. Murphy had hesitated to remove citizens from their houses because he saw them as innocent and did not consider that it was happening for their own good. The cognitive dissonance in these sellouts is spectacular. To solve this right-wrong issue, Love wants a value-neutral subject who can cooperate. She has Fleck scrap the project. RoboCop and rehabs. Elsewhere in the city, a bunch of men break and enter a closed weapons store to look for guns. They weren't criminals, but were just scared citizens looking for ways to protect themselves and their children. Lewis arrives and lets them out, offering to let them go if they paid for the door they broke. While this peaceful negotiation is taking place, Kong, a deranged evil man from the rehabilitation team, crashes into her and opens fire on the men. Kong sets the whole store on fire when Lewis points her gun at him and escapes without as much as a scratch. Love really wants to put a ton of directives in RoboCop to make him as compliant as possible, and for that they needed to take him offline. So she sets a trap for him. Unaware, RoboCop continues protecting the city from crime. He attacks the rehabilitation corps when they try to violently force a woman and her child from a building and shoots down the men. One of the men, Stilson, falls down from the building and onto Kong's car, devastating him completely. Kong is overcome by anger and scales the building to enter the floor they were on. He slits the throat of the woman in front of RoboCop and wipes her blood on his forehead like some brutal war paint. He then attacks him for killing his buddy. Kong puts up a strong fight, but he is no machine and his arm gets blown off. The rest of the rehabilitation corps aim a bazooka at the building and RoboCop crashes down under a wall while trying to save an old man. We see bits of media breaks spliced in where newsreaders Casey Wong and Jess Perkins read the news to show how much the world is in shambles. Nuclear weapons stockpiling at a nuclear power facility in the Amazon rainforest is just the beginning. They speak about the rehabs, aka the Rehabilitation Corps, and the sex scandal in the Vatican. RoboCop wakes up in the lab where Margaret Love decides to subject him to some reality therapy because he keeps thinking of Ellen. She shows him Ellen, who has moved on, married a new man, and was pregnant with his child. Ellen tears up knowing that Murphy was still alive. Her lawyer tries to get Murphy's consent for her marriage, as technically he was still married to Ellen. Unable to withstand the sadness, Murphy says yes and asks her to go away. Love explains that he only has a chunk of Alex Murphy's brain, and if he deludes himself into thinking he is Murphy, he is hurting himself. She has him reprogrammed once more and sends him out to duty on public relations. The new RoboCop has hundreds of more directives, and if he refuses to follow any of them, Love has programmed him to feel terrible pain. He is then sent with an OCP employee to record a message for the kids. On his way, RoboCop sees a bunch of kids playing with water from a fire hydrant, and he stops to teach them the value of conservation. The kids begin swearing at him, and he almost chokes a kid to death for saying a bad word. In a store nearby, a spoiled brat sits on Santa's lap and demands a whole list of toys for Christmas. The mother gently explains that she is too young for a gyrocycle, but Santa eggs her on as he is also the owner of the store. After the kid leaves, a man pulls a gun on Santa for giving him a toy that doesn't work. RoboCop breaks into the store and, when Santa curses, throws him out of a glass window. A trap for RoboCop and a new RoboCop. The OCP employee with RoboCop freaks out and calls Love, who was enjoying herself watching the RoboCop surgery on a man who wasn't sedated. Love calls Seltz, the leader of the rehabs, and discusses their plan to frame Murphy for the death of a cop. The cop they selected was Sergeant Reed, who had it out for the rehabs from day one. Willis is in his apartment talking to Lewis about the rehabs. He recognizes them as mercenaries who had killed natives of the Amazon rainforest. The worst among them was Kong, who was addicted to amphetamine. machines. Lewis suggests taking action against them, but Reed tells her that it's no use as they would kill everybody involved. As if on cue, Gillette, a rehab sharpshooter from across the building, takes out Reed. He begins shooting at Lewis too, but she escapes. Not willing to give up so easily, Gillette chases behind her. He is not disheartened when she pulls out her gun, as he knows that the OCP had been only giving them 3 bullets a day. He pulls out knives and the two get into a high-stakes knife battle. Lewis is a firebrand. It doesn't take her long to stick the knife to Gillette's side, but his rehab colleagues get on her tail immediately. In between, an ad for a new toy, Johnny Rehab, based on the Rehabilitation Corps, is shown. Lewis runs into a nearby cafe where all the striking cops were resting. As soon as the rehab enters, they pull their guns on him. Lewis knocks him out and informs the cops that the rehabs killed their sergeant. They all head to the station to arm themselves and arrest the rehabs. News began to report that RoboCop had gone rogue because of a software installed by terrorists. RoboCop continues walking the streets, not knowing the troubles that await him. By the roadside, a thief tries to steal a car by jacking it, but as soon as he gets into the driver's seat, he is locked into it by seatbelts. The seatbelts squeeze him till he loses his breath, and the car turns on the heater to cook him alive. RoboCop walks into a metro station, where the announcer has had enough of his job. The announcer was the highlight of the comic book series, if you ask me, because he is constantly complaining about the late trains and the numerous things he has to deal with. The metro station has an Elvis impersonator claiming to be selling the King's Shroud and other commuters. When RoboCop sees a commuter smoking right next to a no smoking sign, he shoots him right in the face. Then, RoboCop 2 rolls up. This model resembles the early fully automatic models from the first film that end up killing a random OCP executive during its unveiling. This one is not fully automatic, albeit he's equally ruthless. RoboCop 2 kills anybody and everybody in his sight, and when he uses one of his victims' blood to put a mark over his face, it is clear as daylight to Murphy that it's Kong. The rehabs arrive there too and point their gun at RoboCop, who asks them to talk it out with him. We all knew that was not going to be successful, right? As the rehabs start shooting, Murphy retaliates. Though he keeps them at bay, he is no match to the bigger and better Kong. He is easily battered by Kong, and the announcer just loses his mind over the carnage happening in the station. Despite his situation, he manages to crawl into the tunnels and escape. We see Luke Spindle once more, and this time he is defending RoboCop. He accurately thinks a bigger conspiracy theory is at play, and asks his audience to see past the smoke and mirrors. One of the people in the audience shoots him, but he is not easily silenced and promises to return within 3 days. The news reports this issue and goes on to talk about a nuclear winter in a positive light. As RoboCop escapes, Love reprograms RoboCop 2 and blames RoboCop for all his murders. RoboCop, realizing that he is being messed with, storms the OCP building. Love calls him a disappointment and tells him that she's going to put him into a deep shock. RoboCop is done talking and threatens to choke her to death if she doesn't erase the derivatives she programmed him with. She tries to brush him off as the Murphy in him would not let him kill, but when his hold on her neck tightens, she complies. Murphy checks the data on him and realizes he is more human than Love let on, and destroys all the monitors and hardware of the RoboCop program. She tries to stop him as they only have a single copy of the files, but Murphy has no intention of doing so and pushes her into the burning monitors. He locks the door and leaves. Oh my Love. Love is not someone who gives up easily. She isn't going to roll over and play dead. So she puts herself in RoboCop 2 and bursts out to kill Murphy. As Murphy comes out, he is welcomed by gunfire from the rehabs. It's a bloody affair as Murphy shoots them enough to escape in his police car. Love, now RoboCop 2, chases after him. It wasn't going well for the police officers led by Lewis either. They had walked into an ambush by the rehabs in the police station, and by the time Murphy showed up, most of them were dead as the rehabs had taken their time torturing and killing them. Paired up with Lewis, Murphy takes down the rehabs first, but the bigger fight arrives with Love. Love is enjoying the new power RoboCop 2 gives her, and she loves attacking Murphy. Their fight stretches on a bit too long, leaving both of them burnt and battered. Towards the end, Lewis throws a grenade toward RoboCop 2 and kills Love for good. Murphy kisses Lewis and says goodbye without telling her where he is going. In the aftermath, we see Spindle back on his show, touting the conspiracy theory that RoboCop is out there kicking OCP's ass. RoboCop had moved in with the kids he had rescued from the goons earlier and was still driving around in a car, finding people who needed his help. all the roots. If you read the comic, you can really tell where many of the plot points came from. Margaret Love is clearly Dr. Juliet Fax. Fax in the film does not have a lot of agency. Her role is completely dependent on what the old man says, and she starts an affair with him just to get her way. Love is far more powerful than Fax and makes a better villain if you ask me. She is someone who knows all the different ways you can talk to a person and employs the best one depending on who she is talking to. Before her employment, she was the bleeding heart psychologist who only worried about the children. After her employment, she was a ruthless pusher who would go to any lengths to make the perfect RoboCop. She was also a good overarching villain. In the film, there are a lot of villains: the old man, Kane, Hobb, and the OCP. Here it's OCP and Margaret Love, plain and simple. The rehabs are villains too, but they are mostly acting on orders from either Love or the OCP. I personally liked the ending of the comic book compared to the films. As I told y'all before, the film forgot about Murphy's inhumanity, but you see a lot of character change in Murphy. At first he knew he was Murphy, but seeing Ellen threw him off. We see him give himself completely to being a cop, being a product of OCP, but by the end he realizes that he is a person. He is a man. That is what the kiss between Lewis and Murphy symbolizes. Him embracing his human side and deciding not to be RoboCop anymore. His decision to go rogue shows that he embraced his free will too. The movie robbed Murphy of this, and the best they could do was the final dialogue that he was a human after all. That was neither here nor there. The cops in the film stop their strike because of a drug lord, but here they do so because Warren Reed is killed. It just makes more sense that they would return to work to avenge one of their own rather than apprehend a criminal, which they do every single day. You can see other tiny elements that were kept in the film from Miller's original script, like the Elvis mention and the car that traps carjackers. The rehabs from Miller's script were introduced in RoboCop 3. Frank Miller's comic book RoboCop is far more popular than RoboCop 2, and it is not hard to see why. Personally, I had a hard time reading the comic book because the way women were drawn was particularly distracting. In nearly all the scenes that Lewis or Love are in, especially Love, they are standing in model-like poses that accentuate their curves. It's super weird to see a psychologist, a threatening villain like Love, posing in the middle of a meeting where the men are all drawn standing straight. Even in action sequences of Lewis, her clothes get strategically torn or open while the men fighting against her or alongside her are still dressed. Sometimes in 3 layers, while my girl is in tatters. I didn't really like the art style or the inconsistent palette, but the plot was still engaging as all hell. I think a perfect RoboCop movie would be something in between Miller's first draft and the watered-down film. What do you think of the comic book series? Yay or nay? Let us know in the comments below, and if you liked the video, you know the drill. Like, share, subscribe, and ring that bell. I'll soon be back with content you love, and until then, goodbye!